So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Economic Development session, which is the last session for the day. I think we're all here at this conference because we recognize the enormous clinical potential of stem cells to treat devastating diseases for which there's currently no cure. It's really on the back of that promise that public investments have been made all over the world. And in doing so, there's really been an anticipation that over the long term there's going to be significant economic benefits accruing, whether it's in terms of increased productivity from healthier populations or in terms of the commercial potential for new companies and high-quality jobs. There's been many different models for that public investment, and this afternoon we're going to hear from three of them, from California, from Canada, and from Scotland. I think what we're going to hear is that while these investments are quite different in terms of scope and size and approach, that in every case there's still a very strong interest from the public in the timeframes in which those both clinical benefits and economic benefits are going to be accrued. So we're going to start off with a talk from Michael May from the Centre for Commercialization of Regenerative Medicine, which is based in Toronto, Canada. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Drew. It's my pleasure to be here today and to introduce you to the Centre for Commercialization of Regenerative Medicine. We were launched in June at the Ccrm meeting. We hired 7 employees in the last month, and our facilities are being equipped as we speak. So it's great to be thinking about commercialization 50 years after Till and McCulloch discovered stem cells in Toronto. I thought I'd start my talk by just listing some of the hurdles for translation in Canada, but I think these apply everywhere. We see a predominance of very early stage opportunities out of academic environments. There's little availability of risk capital in our environment. There's a lack of critical mass in business and product development expertise. We create companies prematurely and license deals prematurely. Our technology transfer offices are under-resourced, and there's an inconsistent academic intellectual property ownership policy among the institutions that we work with. Now, the Canadian government over the last few years has been experimenting with a number of ways to support commercialization, and I've listed a few here. First of all, in Canada, we have very strong funding of basic R&D, which has produced excellent academic impact. Over the last 10 years, there have been a number of collaborative grants that have tried to get industry and academia to work together, but in the early days, these were focused too much on technology push. Industry support was very, very soft, and all the work happened in the academic institutions. The Canadian Foundation for Innovation has funded very successfully hundreds of millions of dollars in infrastructure, and the networks of centers of excellence were created. An example is Drew's stem cell network, which I think has created a very effective and open national series of collaborative networks in Canada. So Ccrm is a center of excellence for commercialization and research. There are 22 such centers in Canada around areas of excellence, one of them, ours, being around regenerative medicine, and it's really an experiment by the Canadian government to do commercialization funding in a different way. So our mission for the Ccrm is to create a global nexus for regenerative medicine technology development and commercialization. We've been seeded with $15 million from CSIR, matched by $10 million from industry and academic member institutions, with a focus on enabling technologies and foundational technologies and focusing on translation at the product development stage. And really what we're doing is we're trying to find a way to bridge that commercialization gap in a capital efficient way. In Canada, we call it the pit of hell, actually. So what are existing strengths? Research excellence in stem cell biology and in bioengineering. About $100 million spent in infrastructure around regenerative medicine over the last 5 years, and a very, very strong culture of collaboration. What we want to add to that with our model is business expertise. We're creating a center that has a dedicated team, so we have 25 employees working on product development projects outside of academia, although we use academic infrastructure and facilities to do the work. a strong industry engagement component, and a model of in-licensing technology into our center to advance it so that we can support that very, very strongly and in a focused way. So our plan is to enable product development through a series of core platforms, to integrate science and business excellence, and to create very, very strong links to the market. I have a slide for each of these. Our 3 core platforms are a reprogramming platform where access to many tissue samples in Ontario and particularly in Toronto will be dedicated to building a bank of patient and disease-specific IPS cells. We're taking over an IPS facility that already has 300 cell lines in it, but some of the commercial outcomes of this will, of course, be these enabling technologies, reagents, and tools. The second platform is cell manufacturing, where the objective of this platform is to generate both clinical and commercial quantities of cells with a focus on bioreactors and biosensors and expansion technologies, etc. The third platform is the biomaterials and tissue mimetics platform that will focus in the early days on human cell-based predictive assays, but really integrates our biomaterials expertise with the cells that we produce, ultimately to develop paradigm-shifting cell therapies and identify regenerative medicine biomolecules. In terms of integrating science and business, I think it's very, very important because we're creating a platform outside of the academic environment, but leveraging it. We've created something called the Translation Advisory Group. These are the key principal investigators associated with our center, and we've built over them and with them a strategic advisory board of world-renowned experts in regenerative medicine. I think importantly, we have a board of directors that is a majority from industry, and what's not on this slide is our Commercialization Review Committee, which is composed of industry experts combined with the technology transfer offices of our academic institutions. On the left are our academic institutions, our members. They represent about 90% of the activity in Canada in stem cell biology research and bioengineering. But on the right are a couple of other key partners, including the Stem Cell Network in Canada, Mars Innovation, which is a coalition of 17 hospitals and research institutions representing about $1 billion a year in research. That is our source of IP, but also manages our IP and diligence. And also on here is the Regenerative Medicine Coalition. Ccrm is part of an international group of translation centers from Europe, the US, and Canada that are trying to work together to leverage our individual areas of expertise to, again, try to work on an international basis to move this, the translation component of regenerative medicine forward. The third key thrust of our strategic plan is to link to the marketplace, and we've done this by building an industry consortium representing all aspects of regenerative medicine, the regenerative medicine industry, from the pharmaceutical companies, the cell manufacturers, the tools companies, the reagent companies. We think it's very, very important to engage industry to balance the technology push that the academic institutions are very comfortable with that market pull, and we've spent a lot of time working with these partners that came together for our application and for our launch to align what our capabilities are with the market needs. So this is a busy slide, but I think the most important thing here is the beginning and the end. We don't focus on any particular indication. We're focused on enabling technologies, but there are 3 sources of projects in CCRM. Internal projects where we identify kind of pan-industry problems that we will work on. We also build projects around the intellectual property from our members or from other institutions. And the third source is working with our industry partners to identify bottlenecks in their business and come up with solutions together in a co-development arrangement. You notice that all of the evaluation results in a business case evaluation. We only invest in projects where Ccrm is likely to generate revenue to support the sustainability of our center. So in terms of that, the federal government has three main metrics for our success. One is that they expect in 5 years that we are sustainable. I think that is a little bit unrealistic in commercialization, but we've done a lot of modeling as we launch Ccrm, and we have chosen to work very, very closely with industry because the co-development and licensing revenue from industry partnerships is really key to our long-term sustainability. We believe that we can keep our 25 employees pushing projects forward indefinitely with 15 to 20 projects a year, where 2/3 of those are industry supported. We also plan to return some of our revenue from our success back to our PIs as part of providing something back to the institutions and the researchers in terms of proof of principle fund, and of course are looking for alternate sources of funding to drive sustainability. But the government is really asking us to create companies and build jobs in Canada and Ontario. We believe that we can pay back the government's investment in 7 to 10 years with company creation. And that company creation, if you note at the bottom, before Ccrm was created, the top 10 PIs associated with Ccrm secured about $250 million in funding, created 12 companies, and filed over 400 patents, executing 55 licenses during that time period. So the bottom line is we have to do better than what they did without us. But a lot of those companies are not as viable as we would want, and the licenses are not revenue generating. But with a similar production rate with more successful companies, a little higher production rate in terms of company creation, we believe that we can pay back that initial investment to the government. But it's very important to note that to create that many companies and to allow them to be viable in the future, we will have to attract about $500 million in risk capital to drive those companies forward. So it's one thing to support translation and to create companies, but we really need to attract that risk capital to take those companies to the next phase and make them successful. In terms of improved health, I think the jury is still out. There's lots of promise, but certainly in Canada, there are no technologies, no products out there yet that have reduced the cost of healthcare or improved health. But there is a collaboration ongoing in Canada to bring a number of the GMP facilities together in Canada with Ccrm to tackle the next phase of translation, which is bringing products into the clinic and to address the regulatory issues. So Canada has a very strong culture of collaboration. Ccrm is one aspect of that, and it's ongoing. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Michael. I know we thought as a panel the probably easiest way to manage the Q&A session would be to take all of the questions at the end once we've heard each of the three presentations. So next up, I'm going to ask Kevin Price, who's CEO of the Scottish Stem Cell Network, to say a few words.
So bear with me a moment while I attempt to do this. Okay, so I'm going to give you a brief walkthrough of what's been going on in Scotland. So a little bit of history, a little bit of where we are, talk a little bit about how we go about our daily business, something around metrics. And I think one of the questions possibly I have is public sector support for enabling academics and companies to talk to each other, to put together collaborations. There is certainly a question mark now in the UK, I think, not just in Scotland, about how long does the public sector need to put money into this before either the technology is proven or the investors and major pharma get in. So perhaps we'll get to that in the discussion piece. So first of all, a little bit of history. Scotland really has been investing in the regenerative medicine, certainly the stem cell field, since the sort of mid-90s. And this is enshrined in its strategy. As you're probably aware, Scotland has a devolved government to the extent that it is able to independently develop its own economic strategy. And therefore, one of the areas it's identified, and this is its latest report, 2009, there's another one due out this year, but it's clearly a focus on stem cells and regenerative medicine. That cascades down in Scotland through the Scottish Life Science Advisory Board, so-called LISAB, again 2011, reinforcing the key strengths we have in that area. And then the third piece of that is the Scottish Enterprise Business Plan. Scottish Enterprise, and we have a booth here, Scottish Development International, are effectively the commercial arm of the Scottish government, and they're the people who are going out around the world and attempting either to attract companies into Scotland or indeed, more importantly, to develop collaborations. Part of that delivery is the Scottish Stem Cell Network, and our job is really to create a connected community focused on the development of world-leading and sustainable regenerative medicine industry in Scotland. So the key thing we are in business for is economic outcomes. That's really what we do. So together we're out there reinforcing what we think is Scotland's leading position in this technology, and what we want Scotland to be is a preferred location for collaboration, for companies, for the science. The key thing as well, and the entire, if you like, strategy for this meeting is about translation. I think that is now what people are talking about. Less about, if you like, the basic science, but how are we going to get these products through to market and certainly to give therapeutic benefits to patients. In order to put this strategy in place, Scotland developed what they termed the Stem Cell Intervention Framework, which was set up in 2004. And again, some of this is sort of self-obvious. And what this basically said was, if we're going to create an industry around this, we've got to make sure that all of the cornerstones are in place to make that happen. So you must have infrastructure, you must have the buildings, the pots and pans, the stainless steel to do this. And it set up a number of programs to deliver that. The Centre for Regenerative Medicine, for example, was a bricks and mortar investment. We've also put in place spin-out companies to do manufacturing. And we've put in place a company support network to make sure companies are there. We've heard funding is a key issue in this. Absolutely it is. And in the economic climate that we're currently enjoying in Europe, it's more so. However, the Scottish Government did create, and still has created, funds available specifically for translational research in this field or for collaboration. And this comes out of the UK Stem Cell Foundation efforts to raise money on the private equity sector. I'll come to the people in a moment, but the promotional side is obviously very clear as well. In order to generate collaborations, in order to bring companies in order to create that logistical supply chain, you have to promote, and that was the Scottish Development International investment. So the Scottish Stem Cell Network sits very clearly in the people bit, which is connecting people, empowering people, and attempting to pick up, if you like, some of the issues that, as we all know, keep popping up that you could not have predicted. And I'll talk a little bit about how we go about that. The other thing is creating talent. Clearly, if you've got a big budget, you can buy the talent in. However, what you also want to have for sustainable economic growth is to ensure you've got a homegrown talent as well, and to provide an environment where those individuals choose to stay rather than to move. Pretty picture, bricks and mortar. I think that's the easy way of doing public investment. It looks good. The harder bits really are the softer issues, and I'll talk a little bit about those in a moment. Just a little bit about the network, just to put us into perspective on the global scale. Scotland has 5.5 million people. The network is a relatively small organisation. We are constituted as a not-for-profit company, so we're actually a limited company, which is actually quite helpful in allowing us to leverage our funding and raise further funds. I'll talk a little bit about our funding in a later slide, but we have money coming in from a number of sources. Some of that is core funding. The vast majority of it, over 60% of it, though, is competitively won. We're based at Roslin in Edinburgh. We have a traditional board of directors, scientific board, and so on, and we have just 6 people. If you look at the funding, to put it into perspective, a total budget of about $835,000 for the last financial year. The key point on that is our core funding, Scottish Enterprise, which is the numbers in at least green here, I don't know what it looks like on there, of about $300,000. Basically, we've leveraged that to gain effectively another $500,000. So for every pound of public funding we are given, we've managed to competitively win another £1 or $1.58. A little bit about what we are measured on, and we're measured quarterly. We provide a quarterly report to Scottish Enterprise, who are our paymasters in that respect. Also, some of the other projects we have separate reporting mechanisms, but if I focus on what they're interested in the number of business we have supported to innovate or internationalise, i.e. to get their products outside Scotland, the number of business that are participating in events run by Scottish Enterprise, which is quite important, so publicity around that, the number of business to academia collaborations and the business to business collaborations, equally important. And the number of Scottish businesses that actually join up. So there's a number of metrics going on there. And again, all I can say is we've managed to exceed or meet all of those targets over the last 7 years. So we're quite proud of that achievement. Just wanted to talk a little bit about how we do things, how we go about it. And we've developed what we call the Progress to Therapy platform, which traditionally started, I think, with what one would recognise as normal networking activities, in the sense of a website, newsletters, networking events, meetings, introductions, connecting and collaborating people. We then won from Technology Strategy Board an award to develop a software platform, which we've called Realise, which basically, I can best describe it as a computer interface that allows the user access to a huge number of guidance documents that cover everything from science and technology as it relates to stem cell and regenerative medicine, all the way through to how you commercialise. So how you write a business plan, how you get involved with the regulators. And that tool has been very important in flagging up issues. So where are the gaps? What we then do is, if you like, you imagine it as a machine, you turn the handle, you then identify issues. What we then do is commission outcomes or in fact deliver those outcomes ourselves. So for example, if it's a regulatory issue has been flagged up, we will convene an expert user group to get together to discuss that issue. We'll capture the data, we'll enter it into the Realise software system and advance the technology forward. And so this phase is the one we're just sort of coming out of at the moment. And the way we actually deliver, if you like, or collect that data, again, a whole series of mechanisms from traditional meetings to workshops to working with schools to working with the public. Coming out of this as well, and these topics are being picked up at this meeting in any event, key things in supply chain, in regulation, in manufacturing, finding skilled staff, investment, delivery, logistics. There are huge numbers of issues. And so what we're focusing on over the next 5 or so years is trying to solve some of those issues, capture those outcomes as best practice, and supply that information then to the companies who are coming through the development pipeline. economic outcome is what it's all about. And at the end of the day, that's really where the public sector funding is interested. Just one thing, again, for those in the UK, this has sort of been on the radar for about a year now. The UK government has determined to set up a cell therapy technology and innovation centre in the UK. And this will be a bricks and mortar building that is going to be a focus of investment, a focus of strategic intent for this sector in the UK. It's a very exciting development. A number of proposals have been put forward as to where it would be sited. Clearly, from a Scottish perspective, we've put a bid in to site it in Edinburgh. I believe there are bids for London, for Cambridge. There may be others as well. Exciting. We should hear the results of that in the next month or so. And the business plans for that are looking at getting about £300 million into this area in the UK over the next 10 years. So that is, for us, relatively small numbers compared to Ccrm, but that will be quite a step change and a paradigm shift in the way the UK is looking at this sector. And I think that's all I had to say, so I hope I got to time there.
So our last speaker before we go to Q&A is Elona Baum, who is General Counsel at the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine. Welcome, Elona.
I guess they always say last, but not least. I took a little bit of a different tact in preparing these sets of slides. So I really only have a few slides that talks about Ccrm, and I'm really talking about or emphasizing how we're performing to date, how we're building the economic engine for California. So here's the 3 slides I'll have on who we are. I think many of you have heard who we are already. We're the $3 billion stem cell funding agency created by the people of California through a very innovative political mechanism we have in California, the initiative process. I'm pleased to say that we actually are, we have more than half of our funds that are uncommitted to date. We've committed 1.3. That doesn't mean that we've spent them all, because we commit usually from 3 to 4 years in advance. But we've got a lot of programs already in the midst of being funded and many more to come. I thought I'd just spend a couple seconds or two on what our mission is. You will see in the upper left-hand corner just a picture of our annual report, and in that mission, if you read it, and you could read it right now, it doesn't say anything about economics. It's all patient-driven. It's all about cures, or I shouldn't say cures, but improvements, and it's to relieve human suffering and chronic disease and injury. But I would venture to say if you actually sat down and read very carefully Proposition 71, it's also focused on economics as well. And I have a few quotes up there that talk about improving the California healthcare system and reducing long-term healthcare costs. It's something that California has to do. It's something that the United States has to do. It's something that every single country has to do. And I think that's why we're here today. But we recognize that in doing so, in making people better, we could actually create jobs and improve our economy. And so this is recognized in Prop 71 as well. And I love this terminology. It's to advance the biotech industry as an economic engine for California's future. And I think we are building that engine. So let me just tell you how we're building that engine. First of all, we're seeding, and we've heard a lot about building bricks and mortar. We're doing that. We have created these beautiful state-of-the-art facilities, 12 of them to be specific, and we're also building the intellectual infrastructure. By that, we've done a lot of training. We've done what we could to bring in talent, but we're actually growing it from within. We have spent about $300 million thus far on the physical infrastructure. And now I look at our history as sort of turning down the road and focusing on translation and bridging over the valley of death. We'll still continue to do basic research, but we really need to start focusing our efforts. We were created in 2004. We started actually funding for the most part in 2006, and we have 44 translational projects, which you heard a lot about this morning, and I won't go into them, but we have to make sure that these make it to the bedside. And so a lot of our efforts are focused in that area. As I indicated, we've already spent $361 million in these translational type of areas, and we've attracted a lot of additional funding as well from our international collaborative funding partners. So we heard the word collaboration. That's a very important aspect of what we do too. So we've actually have obtained $58 million from international funding agencies through leveraging. So I think the 410 under the bridging is what was committed, and then what was actually awarded is $58 million from our international funding partners. It's an important distinction. But leveraging is very important. So when you're looking at what we're doing to improve the economy, I think that bringing the monies in is something that needs to be weighed, as well as what you're bringing in terms of jobs and income tax revenue, which we'll get to in a minute. So last slide on what we're doing as well in terms of creating economic benefit. So this is sort of our areas of funding. And we, like I said, go all the way from basic research all the way to phase 2. We will not go to phase 3. Highly unlikely, as Alan said today. I've always heard will not, so I always say will not. And that's why it's very critical that we match up our programs with funding sources. And I am happy to say that one of my pet projects is to sort of try to advance what I call the Opportunity Fund, the Strategic Partnering Fund, which is part of the Opportunity Fund, will be discussed at our next board meeting on October 25th, and it provides additional ways that we can make sure that we onboard pharma and VCs or anybody that will help us establish a path towards the bedside. And as you could see, we have some numbers as to what we've invested in the physical infrastructure, et cetera. We also fund companies in a very big way. Some of these names are very familiar. Geron, $24 million. ViaCyte has obtained a considerable amount of funding from us, $26 million. Hyperion, Biotime, we've heard from Michael West. Fluidigm is more in the device side, so we fund therapeutics and device companies that support this industry. And Stem Cells Inc. Has recently received a planning award from us, and they will be entering into what we call our disease team funding program. It's $20 million over 4 years, with the goal of either doing a phase 1, a phase 2, or doing whatever necessary to get to an IND, and that's where our focus is, along with Oncomed. Little different in that Oncomed is a small molecule, but it's directed at cancer stem cells. So I think this is what we needed to focus on today: is how are we doing? How are we measuring up? I'll say that it's difficult in many respects to actually measure all that we're contributing, because it's hard to ascertain how many NIH grants we're able to attract, but because we have created this infrastructure in California, but I would say a lot. But we have done a study, it's on our website, and it's very clear that we've created revenue already and jobs. We have created 25,000 FTEs, or we will by the time that our funding of $1.1 billion is complete, and we've funded created about $200 million in tax revenues. We have another aspect that we haven't talked about much in the other context, but we will also generate return for California taxpayers through revenue sharing provisions and actually access and pricing provisions. And that's usually a whole nother lecture, so I won't get into that. But we have a loan program for our for-profits that you just heard about. Part of that loan program provides for warrants. We've received some warrants from these companies, or they can choose a multiple risk premium, which is sort of the way venture's set up, so we can get up to maybe a 7x return if things are great and revenue triggers are met. Then there's intellectual property regulations that provide for royalties for nonprofits, and I won't get into the specifics of that, but that's a whole other avenue for revenue generation. And finally, and very importantly, clusters. This is really what drives a lot of economic return. And we have hired an economist, and he's referenced below, Jose Albero, and one of his comments was the ongoing impacts accruing to California is through the emergence of competitive business clusters, which will benefit California. And again, we haven't monetized that, and I think at some day we should, because I think that's a huge driver of economic return. But as much as sort of the nuts and bolts of physical and intellectual property and infrastructure building is very important in terms of economic return, I really do believe that the biggest return will come from the new therapies, transformative therapies. And I have another quote from Jose, where he says in a recent article, it was estimated that while a 1% reduction in mortality from cancer, which of course is one of California's and CRM's targets, will bring $500 billion, sounds like a lot of money, a cure would be worth $50 trillion. So we're swinging for the fences, but we also have, we're also trying to get a few first bases, second base hits as well. So to wrap it up, I think that it's safe to say that we've already given California a terrific return. We've created 25,000 jobs, $200 million in revenues. But I think that we'll see a lot of terrific returns coming from the building of these clusters, business clusters. We have them in San Francisco Bay Area, LA's emerging as one, in San Diego, and then, of course, through improved healthcare outcomes. Thank you very much.
Okay. So do we have any questions from the audience? And if you do, it would be great if you'd come right up to the front with your question.
How you doing? How much has CRM allocated for publicly held companies as far as loans, warrants, and guarantees?
Well, first of all, we don't allocate per se, we award. So I think that's what you mean. An allocation means it's a predetermined amount we will give them.
Award is free.
I'm sorry?
I said award would be a grant.
Award isn't a grant, so I have to do that in my head. Probably at least, we have 3 loans that we've entered into thus far. So it's probably close to $50 million.
And when would those be expected to be allocated or given out?
Well, these three loans have already been awarded, and they're given out over the course of the loan term. So they're signed, sealed, and delivered.
And is that public information?
Everything is pretty much public information.
Okay, because the submission process isn't. That's what I was wondering.
The what?
The submission process as far as who's being considered for an award isn't.
Well, when they receive award, it's all published. We have, and I could help you navigate our website to find, to determine who's received our awards or loans.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, maybe while there's more questions, I'll ask one of my own. Every jurisdiction talks about wanting to be the preferred location for the regenerative medicine industry. We're going to be a global nexus. we all hear those words. Are the spoils going to go to the country or to the jurisdiction which invests the most money, or is it going to be a whole bunch of other factors which go into play, and we're going to have a fairly distributed industry 20 years from now? Maybe I'll start with Kevin.
I think the latter. I think nobody's going to set a business up in a country purely because it's a nice country. I think it's going to be a combination of everything: available funding or support, excellent science, logistics, etc., etc. So I'd certainly like to hope that this technology is spread globally. I think we sort of almost owe it to the taxpayers that we do make sure everybody gets a return.
Michael?
I think different jurisdictions will have different areas of expertise and different strengths as well. I mean, we're focused on foundational technologies and enabling technologies, and others will emerge as particularly strong in clinical validation. But so I think it will be spread out, and the fact that we are all collaborating internationally, CRM is a great example of that. I think will also drive that type of global business.
Elona?
I guess I'm not in disagreement with any of the comments. I don't think science knows any boundaries, which is why we focus so much on collaborative efforts. I would hope that our seeding will make us a very large contender in the field, and I believe it will. And that's why we like to call ourselves the stem cell state.
Okay, there's a question.
Hi, James Downs, Ccrm, Leipzig, Germany. My question is particularly for Michael and for Kevin. Andy Grove this morning talked about one of the challenges, particularly in the academic world, is just the silo mentality and lack of collaboration and getting them to work together. Being in Germany, I noticed it's particularly a strong problem in the clustering and the silo mentality among academic institutions. In your two relative experiences in trying to develop these networks that you're doing, has that been a particular problem for you? And so, how are you overcoming it, getting them to work together?
Shall I go first? Yeah, it is a problem. I think we're going about it in two ways. Firstly, from an infrastructure perspective, we have a concept called BioQuarter. And the idea with that is that you get everybody on one side. So clinicians, researchers, patients. So you've got a hospital right next to an incubator for companies. So you try and make it almost impossible for people not to collaborate. I mean, they literally bump into people. I think also there's something around the academic business model, and we've had endless debates about this, but the focus of academics, as I understand it, is to publish in peer-reviewed journals of high quality so that they can get awards, a grant award, so that they can do more research to get published and so to get an academic to be entrepreneurial and actually make that leap and want to collaborate with a company is difficult. And I think the individual really has to want to do it. So part of what we're trying to do is provide an incentive for those less than entrepreneurial individuals to see a benefit in collaboration and make sure those rewards are there for those that do. But I think it is quite a challenge to get people to collaborate, bizarrely. But, I don't know if you...
I think Canada has had, particularly the stem cell scientists in Canada, have really demonstrated strong collaboration. It may be because they had to work together in the early days to get funded. They don't have $1 billion or $4 billion to work with. I think it comes down to leadership, particularly of the senior scientists in the group. I think if you were to look at the strengths in Canada, it would be very much centered in Toronto and in Ontario. And when you put together 10 or 15 hospitals all within walking distance, you start to build a critical mass there where collaboration wins awards. And so I think we have generated a strong culture of collaboration in Canada. I think that's really one of the great strengths behind Ccrm.
And if I could add to that, I would say that CIRM's president, Alan Trounsend, has been an incredible champion of collaboration, even with our disease team grants or loans. That's the foundation of those is collaborative effort, because it takes many different disciplines in order to advance a potential therapy into the clinic. And Alan realized that very early and promoted and structured these types of grants as being 4 years, multidisciplined, and a large amount, $20 million, in order to achieve the incentives and the infrastructure needed to support a collaborative team effort.
Okay. I'll use my chair's prerogative to ask another question. We all recognize within the field of research and in industry that this is a 10, 15, 20-year venture to get from where we are now to kind of much more widespread implementation of therapies. Yet we're all working with funding windows of 3 years, 5 years, and so on. And allied with that, we've had all of the hype in the press around what stem cell research will bring. We're trying to manage all of the false expectations as well set by many of the clinics operating outside of our jurisdictions. How do we manage those expectations in a way that can enable further investments of public money to continue to see us to the end of the 15 or 20-year pipeline? And is it realistic to expect that the public will continue to invest over that time period? Maybe we'll start with Kevin.
Yeah, so talking from a Scottish perspective, it is a challenge. I think, as you probably saw from my presentation, the network has been in existence since 2003. Normally, government would probably see 10 years as an investment in a particular industry enough, let's put it like that. So I think we always constantly have to promote the benefits, the potential benefits, but more importantly, start delivering some tangible results here. And we were having a discussion a little earlier about segmenting the marketplace here. And I believe that there are here and now markets that we should be focusing on in the tools and technologies arena, which currently are delivering profitability. So and we heard from Stephen Minger here earlier about GE, who are developing toxicity screening assays and drug screening assays. But my view would be that I think we have to look at the whole market. Certainly we should continue to look at cell therapies, but let's not neglect what I determine as nearer market opportunities in drug discovery and in toxicology. And I think if we can get some wins in that, I think the appetite to continue to invest for, as you say, the 20-year vision, I think will continue.
So I agree, and we have a very strong focus on engaging the industry that exists in regenerative medicine, and it is around the tools companies and the reagent companies. And even if a fraction of the thousands of trials ongoing right now are successful, there are still many bottlenecks in making businesses out of those successful trials in manufacturing, etc. And so by enabling the business over time, by creating jobs and creating products related to enabling the cell therapies, but also focusing on drug screening as an earlier target, I think is certainly our focus and a way to make a business of this on the short term. And I think we have to think of it that way. We have to create businesses.
Okay.
And I just wanted to first start off by correcting sort of a misnomer. People seem to think that CIRM has a 10-year life. It's a minimum of 10 years. It all depends at the rate on which we do fund. So we could conceivably go out if we weren't funding at the top permitted amount, much longer than that. I do believe in low-hanging fruit, personally. I think that we should try to figure out where there's some early wins. And I know our management is concerned about overhyping the field and promising cures. So I always try to stop myself when I say that cures, because that is certainly the hope, but we don't want to overpromise.
Okay, got time for one last question here at the front.
Hi, my name is Frances Saldana. I'm from the Huntington's Disease Society of America, Orange County chapter. And I keep hearing the words collaboration. I just wonder when that's going to happen truly worldwide, because I know the answer is there somewhere between the knowledge that is held by all the scientists, pharmaceutical companies all over the world. There is an answer. The cure for Huntington's or a treatment for Huntington's is there. If you talk about an early win, I would say that's Huntington's. You know what chromosome it's in chromosome 4. They know how to start it, how to stop it. We don't have a lot of time. I lost my husband 23 years ago. I lost my youngest daughter almost 2 years ago. I will lose my 2 other children within the next 3 years. We don't have a lot of time. With Huntington's families, it's our 9/11, where it's happening, our families are dying. Scientists are talking about collaboration. Is it really going to happen? Is it really going to happen? When is it going to happen? You talk about an early one. I think this is it. And before I finish, I want to say thank you, Ccrm, because Ccrm has given us so much hope. I think that's the closest that we've gotten to true collaboration. But if we saw it worldwide, I think we would have a treatment or a cure for Huntington's. I guess my question is when?
Okay. So I think collaboration is happening. It can always be better. I think there are some excellent organizations. So the International Society of Stem Cell Research, for example, is reaching out now and having collaborative meetings around the world. It's having regional meetings. I think the key thing still, though, is how do we turn it into business? Because at the end of the day, companies need to step up and actually take these projects on and turn them into commercial opportunities. That's the only way, effectively, new medicines will come to market. So I think the collaboration really needs to involve companies far more than perhaps we currently have. And that's certainly where we're working. Our entire ethos is less around the academic collaborations, which I think are working very well, and more about trying to get companies to create some pull. The moment it's pushing products out into the marketplace and hoping someone picks them up. We've got to create more pull from the pharmaceutical sector to identify the ideas that are very close to market, as we said.
And I think because Ccrm seems to be very good at providing hope, I'd like to perhaps end by saying that I think we're starting to see the pharmaceutical companies investing in gene therapy. Merck recently did, and we, as you know, at Ccrm have been funding stem cell gene modified projects, of which Huntington's is one. And at least if you look at the Merck, they seem to be interested in investing there, so I think that's great news.
Okay. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for coming along this afternoon. Thank you for your questions, and I'd like you to join me thanking the panel for their talks and for their answers this afternoon.